easy you want Americans to eat less? I have the diet for you. Cook it yourself. Eat anything you want just as long as you're willing to cook it yourself. This is a quote by journalist Michael Pollan in his book, Cooked. The last part of that quote often plays in my head. Eat anything you want just as long as you're willing to cook it yourself. Another quote from that book talks about how obesity rates are inversely correlated with the amount of time spent in food preparation. So the more time a nation devotes to food preparation at home, the lower its rates of obesity. As someone who very much grew up in a convenience food household, we actually had 2 microwaves, not just one, so that more food could be microwaved at the same time for our family of 4. I had this belief since I was young that cooking from scratch was really hard and time-consuming and this kind of out-of-reach thing that was reserved for chefs and people that worked in restaurants. And the only way to cook a batch of brownies was with a box mix, or pizza came pre-frozen and was cooked by popping it in the oven. And so when we started our real food journey around 2011 or 2012, I was shocked by how easy it was to make from scratch so many of these foods that I'd previously only ever bought in some sort of ready-made convenience form. As we've been down this journey for a while now, there are some simple swaps that I find myself relying on over and over again to avoid takeout or packaged foods and instead make healthier homemade meals that are quick, easy, and delicious, even when life is really full. It's kind of crazy how I used to love going out to eat, and now I'd much prefer to eat at home. Every time we eat out, it feels hard to spend so much extra money on food that leaves us not feeling great and that we could often easily prepare at home.
Hi! Woo! Check it out! That's our table! There's our faces.
We just got back from participating in the Homestead Freedom Festival in Southern Illinois, and we laughed and learned from some awesome speakers and sweated a lot. But it was such a sweet time for our family to pull away from our standard day-to-day here on our homestead and connect with so many wonderful people. It always feels extra challenging to jump into Monday morning after being away for the weekend, but these little trips away are so worth it and good for our whole family.
I remember it like yesterday. I still got the article. They said that by now, 2025, land prices would drop 50%. Farmland prices would drop 50% because we wouldn't need farmland anymore. Well, what happened? How could they have been so wrong?
We are experiencing quite the heat wave here in the Midwest. It seems like after being gone for just a few days, everything exploded in the garden. So my goal for this week is to get out there every morning to weed or do what needs done in the garden for 30 to 60 minutes while the temperatures are bearable before heading out to milk and do regular chores. I like to start with using a stirrup hoe on the sides of rows when I'm weeding because this is a much easier way to knock out a lot of those weeds that aren't super close to the plant itself. Then for the weeds on top by the plant, I come back through and hand weed. Sticking with it and doing a little bit every day can really make a difference in the long run while not feeling overwhelming. Then it's in to help our kids with a quick breakfast of the standard, scrambled eggs and yogurt, nothing fancy because we are off to swimming lessons every morning this week. Our meals do look quite a bit different in the summer. Less soups and slow cooker meals, although we still have them peppered in here and there. More meat with veggies or fruit types of meals like burgers or steaks, salads from the garden, sandwiches, that sort of thing. For lunch, I'm gonna make salmon burgers with sweet potato fries. In our last Azure Standard pickup, we picked up 10 pounds of their ground salmon that are already divided into 1-pound packages. These have been perfect for turning into burgers. I'll start by getting the sweet potatoes in the oven because they take the longest. So to make baked sweet potato fries, just slice them into matchsticks and then toss them in a bit of oil and some seasonings. For sweet potatoes, honestly, I usually just use salt. We add more seasonings with regular potatoes, and then you bake them in a single layer at around 425 degrees Fahrenheit for 30 to 35 minutes. I like to let them sit on the pan for a few minutes before serving. I find this helps them crisp up a bit. Next is the salmon burgers. Now, this isn't really a recipe I'm following, more just making it up as I go. I'm gonna mix the ground salmon with almond flour and 2 eggs as a binder. Most recipes call for breadcrumbs, but I typically substitute breadcrumbs for either almond flour or oat flour. And then add salt, a splash of Worcestershire sauce, and mustard. Form it into patties and they're ready to cook up on the stove. I always make a few pounds worth of burgers at once, so these will feed us for at least 2 meals instead of just 1. So let's talk safe, non-toxic cookware options. I wish I had known more about this back when we were getting married and we were registering for all the things, including a large set of non-stick, Teflon-coated pans that we ended up having to get rid of. Last year, we actually did a cooking video. We were making breakfast recipes, including muffins, and I asked you guys if you had a good suggestion for a safer, non-toxic muffin tin. We were using silicone muffin cups at the time, which I had heard might not be the best safe option for our family. And one of the brands that kept coming up over and over again was Caraway. So we got their muffin tin and have been using it and loving it. Recently, we got their cookware set too, and I've been really liking that as well. It's crazy that over 70% of the pans sold in the US still are made with Teflon and all of the nasty chemicals that come with it. But I love that Caraway's pans are both non-stick, but they're made with ceramic, making them safe for our family. One of my favorite features is that they are a one-stop shop. Their pots and pans can go from the stovetop to the oven, meaning that I can make an entire meal without having to dirty a whole bunch of dishes. I also really love that our kids like to cook with them. They're lighter weight and the non-stick just makes them really easy for our kids to use as well. If you're wanting to swap out your pans for a non-toxic alternative, check out Caraway. I'd recommend getting the cookware set since you'll save 20% off by bundling, plus you can stack our discount code FromScratch10 and get an additional 10% off. You can use our code to save on all of their products site-wide. Just click or screenshot our code for when you're checking out. When the salmon burgers are done, I'll just pop them in the warming oven to keep them hot until everything is ready. Then the last component is a homemade mayo with avocado oil to turn into an easy tartar sauce. One of the things that I'm pretty dead set against is buying salad dressing. It's so easy to make your own, it's cheaper, and the ingredients are so much better for you. And I have to admit, with this pregnancy, I have been loving mayo. Mayo and goat cheese, that's what this baby likes. And mayonnaise is the perfect base for creamy sauces and dressings. Thankfully, now you can find mayo made with avocado oil at the store with clean ingredients, but it's pretty pricey. If I'm buying mayo from the store, I always get the Chosen Foods brand mayo from Costco. Almost all mayo from the store is filled with junky seed oils, and they are very sneaky. So many will advertise that they're made with avocado oil, but you have to read the ingredient label. A lot of those primarily use soybean oil or a different kind of seed oil, and then just use a small amount of avocado oil, but claim that they're made with avocado oil. Mayo is one of those things that I would have thought would have been so hard to make from scratch. But as it turns out, it's really easy. You only need a few ingredients and you can easily whip it up in just a couple of minutes. The first big thing is to make sure your ingredients are at room temperature. If not, the emulsion may not work. So I add egg, apple cider vinegar, a squirt of mustard, and around a half teaspoon of salt into a jar. I shared our exact recipe below, but know that this is not something you need to be completely exact with. Most recipes for mayonnaise out there use lemon juice as the acid instead of apple cider vinegar, but I actually prefer using apple cider vinegar, and we always have that in our pantry. Use an immersion blender and begin blending. This is the next important thing when it comes to making homemade mayo. Go slowly. Slowly drizzle 1 cup of avocado oil into the mixture of other ingredients. Slow is key to getting a strong emulsion, and an emulsion is where the magic happens. This is what makes the liquid mix in and form that thick mayo texture. Take a deep breath. This will take a few minutes, but then that's it. Then you'll have mayo. To turn it into a basic tartar sauce, I'm going to add some finely chopped pickles, lemon juice, and salt. Our dill isn't quite ready for harvesting yet, so we're out of that right now, but normally I'd add that in too. I also like to do around a 50-50 blend of mayo and yogurt when I'm making sauces or dressings instead of doing all mayo. But most recipes out there for tartar sauce would use only mayo. Lunch is served, and altogether it only took about 45 minutes start to finish to prepare. One of the big areas of struggle for both myself and many others that I talk to when it comes to eating real food is wanting some go-to meals or snacks that are more grab and go for those busy days or nights when you still want something nutritious and filling but don't have a lot of time. Recently, one of our favorites to fill this need has been making these homemade yogurt-based bagels. We've done a similar recipe for pizza crust, but these yogurt bagels are awesome for being able to prep in advance and have ready to go. Since they're made with primarily flour and yogurt, along with a couple teaspoons of baking powder and salt, they are much higher in protein than the standard bagel that only has carbohydrates with very little protein. We love taking them on hikes with friends, picnics, or to the pool in the summer. You can eat them plain or with peanut butter, or I love adding meat and cheese and turning them into a sandwich to make them a little heartier. Most of the yogurt bagel recipes out there say that you have to use Greek yogurt or it won't work. But we always use what we have, which is our homemade yogurt. And it's fairly thick, but not nearly as thick as Greek yogurt. And so to adjust this recipe, I just add a bit more flour so that it becomes a dough that can be handled. We use freshly ground soft white wheat flour from the organic soft white wheat berries that I got in bulk from Azure Standard. And that's another easy swap that's been really helpful. When we first started our health journey, I avoided wheat altogether. But over time, we've realized that we can eat it moderately and enjoy it, but when we do, we always grind it fresh and store any extras in the fridge. This way, it's as fresh as possible and retains as much of the nutrition as possible, which honestly is a very different thing than most of the bags of flour on the grocery store shelves that have been sitting in the package for who knows how long. We have the Nutrimil Harvest Grain Mill, which has been a really good investment for us. It grinds several cups of flour in only a couple of minutes. Then making these is as simple as mixing the 3 dry ingredients and adding the yogurt. Then I add a bit more flour until it becomes a dough that is not so sticky but can be handled and kneaded several times. After that, divide the dough into 8 pieces, and with each dough ball, roll them into a rope that's about 3/4 inch thick and connect the ends so that it becomes a circle. Then I dip the dough into a bowl with a couple of beaten eggs to do an egg wash and lay them out on a pan. If you wanted to add seasonings to the top of your bagel, something like sesame seeds or everything bagel seasoning, after the egg wash would be the time. When they're all finished, bake for around 20 to 25 minutes in a 375-degree oven. And that's it. They slice beautifully, and the texture really is so good and closely resembles that of a hearty bagel. It's pretty amazing. These will make a really fast and easy dinner for us tonight. I love that I can make these whenever I have an hour in the margin, and they stay fresh for a few days, or you could freeze them for later use. Summer is also the time of year when our cows are being rotationally grazed on fresh grass that I try to make and freeze our supply of butter for the year. So I knew that there were benefits to grass-fed butter versus conventional butter in terms of increased levels of fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, minerals, and antioxidants, as well as more omega-3s and a more balanced omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, as well as increased conjugated linoleic acid, or CLA. But the thing that I didn't realize was how much easier it is to make butter in the summer versus when our cows are eating hay in the winter. It's been so interesting over the years to see how Thimble's milk changes drastically depending on the time of year and her diet and where she's at in terms of calving. For instance, with a new calf, she'll reserve most of her cream when I milk for the calf, and then in other seasons when the calf is older or has weaned, I'll get significantly more cream in her milk. I like to make butter in our Vitamix blender, and in the summer a few things happen. 1, the butter turns from cream to butter much more quickly than in the winter. 2, I get a much greater amount of butter for the same amount of cream. And 3, the butter is much more yellow than in the winter with all the added nutrients. There are several methods for making butter, but the easiest one that I've found is to add the cream to our blender. I typically make 1 quart at a time, which yields around 1 pint of butter in the summer. I turn it on high for just a few seconds and then drop it down to low or medium speed, and pretty quickly you'll see the cream thicken like a whipped cream and then turn to forming the solid butter and the liquid buttermilk. Once it gets to this stage, I'll strain out the butter from the buttermilk and run the butter under cold water to extract any remaining liquid before storing the butter in a jar where we'll keep it long term in the freezer until we're ready to use it. I'll put the buttermilk back in the fridge to use later in smoothies or baking. Rolling away. Ooh, all right. And the salt. The last thing I need to make today is our blueberry cornmeal cake. Now, this is one of our favorite desserts for bringing to parties or events. It's always such a crowd pleaser and perfect for summer, although I like to make it all year round with frozen blueberries. I would in no way call this a healthy dessert. It has plenty of sugar in it. However, this is where the words of Michael Pollan come back. Eat anything you want, just as long as you're willing to cook it yourself. Now, I certainly wouldn't have this cake daily or in huge quantities. However, when you compare this delicious homemade cake to anything you'd find packaged at the store or the bakery section, I guarantee you that this is going to be a way better option. All of the ingredients are real food ingredients. We combine fresh ground flour, that same soft white wheat flour that I used in the bagels, and freshly ground cornmeal from our dent corn that we grew. Then there's baking powder and salt, and then you can either use butter or coconut oil. For a sweetener, any granulated sugar will work, but I prefer to use sucanat, which is made from 100% sugar cane and still contains the natural molasses so that it's richer in minerals than most sugars where all of those nutrients have been removed. Then there's eggs, sour cream, and blueberries. When I think about this versus the steps involved in the cake mixes that I used to buy from the store, yes, there are a few more ingredients required, but overall, making your own cake from scratch is really not much harder than mixing up a store-bought cake mix. And when you make your own, you get to be in charge of the ingredients, and these are so much better. And it's an opportunity to learn. For instance, if you're making blueberry cake, always reserve a little bit of flour to mix your blueberries in before adding it to the cake at the end. Coating the blueberries in flour before adding them to the batter helps the blueberries not sink to the bottom and be more evenly distributed throughout the cake. Coating the blueberries in flour also reduces the risk of the blueberries just bleeding all over the batter and turning the whole thing blue. Until a couple of years ago, I had no idea why my blueberries always sunk to the bottom whenever I made blueberry muffins. I like to add a streusel on top with flour, cornmeal, sucanat, cinnamon, salt, and then cold butter to get the texture of coarse crumbles. Bake it up and that's it. Homemade, real food ingredients that are still dump and go and one of the most requested desserts in our house. Yes, cooking takes time, but planning ahead, making some easy meals or snacks like bagels in the margin, or cooking double what's needed at one meal to have an easy meal sometime later in the week really helps to make feeding our family day in and day out so much more doable, even in the very busy seasons. And simple things like grinding fresh flour or making our own sauces and dressings take hardly any time at all and is a great way to elevate meals and increase nutrition. And maybe that extra time in the kitchen isn't just worth it, maybe it's actually the very best thing that we can be doing for the health of our family.